James had always been the type of person who left water bowls outside his apartment complex. Living in Neo-Singapore's lower districts, he'd seen too many stray cats and dogs struggling through the perpetual haze that hung over the city like a suffocating blanket. The water recyclers couldn't keep up with demand, and clean H2O was expensive enough that most people barely had enough for themselves. But James wasn't most people. Every morning before his shift at the fusion plant, he'd fill 3 metal bowls with filtered water and place them strategically around the building's perimeter. The gesture cost him nearly a quarter of his weekly water ration, but the sight of a grateful animal drinking deeply made the sacrifice worthwhile. On this particular Tuesday, as the artificial dawn began to pierce through the smog, James discovered something extraordinary. 2 creatures, no larger than house cats, were huddled around his largest water bowl. At first glance, they appeared to be some kind of exotic lizard. Their scales shimmered with an iridescent quality that seemed to catch and refract the dim morning light. But as James crept closer, his breath caught in his throat. Wings. Delicate, translucent wings folded against their backs like crumpled silk. "Dragons," he whispered, hardly believing the word as it left his lips. The smaller of the 2 creatures lifted its head, revealing intelligent amber eyes that held far more awareness than any terrestrial animal should possess. It regarded James with neither fear nor aggression, but with something approaching curiosity. James remained perfectly still, afraid that any sudden movement might frighten them away. These weren't the mighty, city-destroying beasts of ancient legends. These were babies, vulnerable and clearly desperate for the basic necessities of life. The larger dragon, its scales a deeper blue-green, dipped its snout back into the water bowl and drank in small, careful sips. Its companion, smaller and bearing scales that shifted from silver to gold depending on the light, watched James with those remarkable eyes. "You're not from Earth, are you?" James asked softly, more to himself than to the creatures. As if in response, the smaller dragon tilted its head, and James could have sworn he detected something like understanding in its gaze. Over the following days, James found himself adjusting his routine. He arrived earlier each morning, bringing not just water but small portions of his own food. The dragons, he'd taken to calling them Cosmos and Nova, seemed to recognize him now. They no longer fled when he approached, instead waiting patiently for their daily sustenance. It was Mino, his neighbor and fellow plant worker, who first confronted him about his unusual pets. "James, what the hell are those things?" she demanded one morning, finding him crouched beside the water bowls as the 2 dragons fed. Mino had always been practical to a fault, her dark hair perpetually pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail, her coveralls bearing the permanent stains of industrial work. She looked at the dragons with the same analytical expression she reserved for malfunctioning reactor components. "I think they're refugees," James replied, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "Refugees?" James gestured toward the sky, where the first interstellar transport ships had begun appearing 6 months ago. The Galactic Union had finally made contact with Earth, but the initial cultural exchange had been limited to government officials and corporate representatives. Ordinary citizens like James and Mino had only heard rumors and seen grainy footage on the news feeds. "Think about it," James continued. "The transport schedules, the timing, these little ones showed up right around when the first civilian transport started arriving. Maybe not all the passengers were humanoid." Mino knelt beside him, studying the dragons more carefully. Cosmos approached her cautiously, sniffing at her outstretched hand. When the creature's small pink tongue licked her palm, she laughed despite herself. "They're intelligent," she observed. "Look at how they're watching us, processing our behavior." "More than intelligent," James agreed. "I think they understand us." As if to prove his point, Nova spread its wings slightly and made a soft trilling sound that seemed almost like an attempt at communication. Over the next week, James and Mino developed a routine of caring for the young dragons together. They researched everything they could about the known species in the Galactic Union, eventually discovering references to the Draconari, an ancient reptilian species known for their wisdom and their role as interstellar peacekeepers. The breakthrough came when James brought his old tablet to show the dragons images of various alien species. When he reached the section on Draconari, both Cosmos and Nova became visibly excited, their scales brightening and their wings fluttering rapidly. "Their parents," Mino breathed. "They're looking for their parents." That afternoon, James made a decision that would change everything. He contacted the Galactic Union's Civilian Liaison Office, a bureaucratic nightmare that had been established to handle the increasing number of human-alien interactions. The response came within hours. A formal request for James and Mino to bring the dragons to the Union Embassy for processing. "We're not processing them," James declared firmly when the officials arrived. "They're children, not cargo." The lead diplomat, a tall humanoid with silver skin and multiple eyes, regarded James with something approaching respect. "You have cared for Draconari younglings without compensation or official recognition. This demonstrates the humanitarian principles we had hoped to find in your species." "We did what anyone should do," Mino replied simply. The reunion that followed brought tears to both their eyes. The adult Draconari who arrived to claim Cosmos and Nova were magnificent beings, their scales gleaming like jewels, their wings spanning several meters. But it was the gentle way they nuzzled their children, the soft harmonics they sang to comfort them, that truly impressed James and Mino. Before departing, the elder Draconari approached James and Mino directly. When it spoke, its voice resonated with the weight of centuries. "Your species shows promise," it said. "You care for the vulnerable without expectation of reward. You recognize intelligence regardless of form. These are the qualities that build lasting civilizations." As the family prepared to leave, Nova broke away from its parents and approached James one final time. The young dragon pressed something, small and warm, into his palm, a scale that continued to shimmer with inner light. "A token of friendship," the elder explained, "so that when humanity joins the greater community of worlds, you will be remembered as those who showed kindness to strangers." James watched the dragons disappear into the transport ship, then looked down at the scale in his palm. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. "Just water bowls," he said quietly to Mino. She smiled. Just being human. Above them, the transport rose into the smoggy sky, carrying its precious cargo toward the stars. But James knew this wasn't an ending. It was humanity's first real step toward proving they deserved a place among the civilized species of the galaxy. All because he'd left water out for strays.